Hello and welcome to this edition of World at War. My name is Mohammed Saleh. The Israeli ground offensive will not stay limited to northern Gaza. What has now become abundantly clear is that the Israeli ground offensive will strike even the southern part of Gaza. But remember, right since the beginning of this war, Israel had been insisting that all Palestinian civilians should flee to the southern part of Gaza, as southern Gaza would be a safe zone for them. In the last fortnight, repeatedly, the Israeli military leadership had insisted that Hamas had its command center under the Al-Shifa hospital. So the Al-Shifa hospital was raided by the Israeli forces. But what really did the Israeli forces find in the Al-Shifa hospital? And now, the former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert claims that Hamas has its command center not in the Al-Shifa hospital as was earlier claimed, but actually in the southern city of Khan Younis, which is where the Israeli ground offensive is expected to shift to next. Our next report gets you more. These chilling satellite images of the main road connecting northern Gaza with southern Gaza will give you a glimpse of the scale of the Palestinian people who are being uprooted from their homes from northern Gaza. Each dot that you see on the road is a human being with dreams, hopes, aspirations. But at the moment is just trying to flee to safety. Hungry, thirsty, and in many cases wounded, with nothing more than the clothes on their back. Israel claims it is going after Hamas, but what we are witnessing is the depopulation of northern Gaza as the Israeli forces continue with their ground assault. Despite this exodus, there are still an estimated 400 to 600,000 Palestinians who remain in northern Gaza. This video put out by the Israeli Defense Forces on the 17th of November will give you a sneak peek into Israel's military activities in the once densely populated and tightly constructed neighborhoods of northern Gaza. Israeli tanks and heavy armor have rolled in. The Israeli troops are going through building after building, home after home, often flattening entire structures as they inch forward. The Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, in an interview to CBS, has now admitted that Israel has failed in minimizing civilian casualties in Gaza. On the other hand, the Israeli forces are meeting with some dogged resistance from Hamas fighters. This video shared by Hamas shows the tactics that are being deployed. Close combat is complicated, and even the best militaries in the world struggle. Hamas fighters are using their dense network of tunnels to great effect, emerging out of destroyed buildings and scattered rubble to stage ambushes and catching the Israeli soldiers by surprise. Hamas snipers can be seen taking down Israeli soldiers, and in some cases, they're even firing rocket-propelled grenades into buildings where the Israeli troops have gone into. But this is asymmetric warfare, and Hamas's crude firearms are simply no match to the devastating firepower that Israel has rained down on Gaza. So as the war enters into its 7th week, Palestinian hospitals have now emerged as the new front lines in this battle. When the Al-Ahli Baptist Hospital was bombed on the 17th of October, resulting in many casualties, Israel was categorical. It had said that it does not target hospitals that are protected under international law. But in the last fortnight, Israel has accused Hamas of hiding in Palestinian hospitals.
These Israeli attacks are by far the worst genocide of this century. Secondly, we condemn the attacks from Israel on the health facilities which caused total blackout of a number of hospitals in Gaza.
The IDF's claims is a form of framing done by the IDF to justify attacks to come. They portray it as if there are bunkers, headquarters of Hamas, and this is what they will try to execute. Second, attacks around the Indonesian hospital are terror attacks, aimed at giving a reason for civilians to move to the south and justify these attacks according to the claims made. This is why MERC deny these claims, be it through technical or diplomatic means.
On the 27th of October, the Israeli Defense Forces had put out this video of the Al-Shifa hospital, with the claim that Hamas had its command center right underneath the main building of the Al-Shifa hospital. This was an intelligence claim that was also backed by American officials and even by the American President Joe Biden himself.
Can you detail for us what kind of evidence that you have seen that Hamas has a command center under Al-Shifa hospital?
No, I can't tell you. I won't tell you.
Do you feel absolutely confident based on what you know that
Yes.
that is the truth?
Yes.
And Mr. President, after today, would you still refer to President?
The Al-Shifa hospital, remember, is the biggest medical facility in the Gaza Strip, where an estimated 60,000 Palestinian people had sought refuge from the Israeli bombs. And this is a detailed video released by the Israeli Defense Forces after having raided the Al-Shifa hospital. What has been found are some arms and ammunition and an entrance to a tunnel several meters away from one of the buildings of Al-Shifa hospital. Questions are now being raised about what Israel originally claimed existed underneath the Al-Shifa hospital and what has actually been found. In a recent interview to Euronews, the former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert now claims that Hamas's command center exists in Khan Younis in southern Gaza and not in the Al-Shifa hospital as was earlier claimed. And Khan Younis has already been given a notice that all civilians must evacuate from there.
We are determined to advance our operation. It will happen wherever Hamas exists, including in the south of the Strip. It will happen at the time, place and conditions that are best for the military.
So what this means is that there is no place safe for the innocent civilians and children in the Gaza Strip who are paying the ultimate price in this mindless and mind-numbing violence that continues without end. While the world's attention has been fixed on the Israel-Palestine war, the nearly 21-month-long conflict between Russia and Ukraine still continues to rage on, with the Ukrainian armed forces now claiming to have made some significant headway on the Russian-occupied east bank of the Dnipro River. Russian and Ukrainian forces have been entrenched on opposite sides of the Dnipro River since last November, when Moscow had withdrawn from the western part of the Kherson region. So what has Russia been up to? Now, on the 16th of November, the Russian Defense Ministry released a video of an intercontinental ballistic missile equipped with a nuclear-capable Avangard Hypersonic Glide Vehicle that was loaded into a launch silo in southern Russia. So how significant are the capabilities of the Avangard Hypersonic Glide Vehicle? Our next report gets you the details.
The Avangard is a nuclear-capable hypersonic boost glide vehicle developed by the Russian Federation. It was one of the 6 next-generation weapons Russian President Vladimir Putin boasted about during a speech in 2018.
The new system Avangard is invincible for today's and even future anti-aircraft systems of the potential enemy. It's a great success and a great achievement. The Avangard system will be available to the strategic missile forces next year.
In the Russian Defense Ministry video released on Thursday, a ballistic missile is seen being transported to a launch silo. Is gradually raised into a vertical position and then lowered into a shaft in the Orenburg region near Kazakhstan. The origins of the Avangard Hypersonic Glide Vehicle, or HGV, date back to mid-1980s. It was around this time that the erstwhile USSR first started research on hypersonic warheads. The initial efforts came to an abrupt pause in 1991, when the Soviet Union broke up. The project was reinstated in the mid-1990s by the Russian defense manufacturer NPO Mashinostronia under a new name, Project 4202. Russia's 2014 military intervention in Ukraine further delayed the development of Avangard as a critical maneuver and targeting control system for the weapon was produced in Ukraine. Between 1990 and 2018, there were approximately 14 reported flight tests of the Avangard. And in December 2018, Russia test-fired the weapon from the Dombrayevsky missile base in Orenburg Oblast. The HGV was fitted atop an SS-19 ICBM, which boosted the vehicle more than 6,000 kilometers, before striking a target in the Kura shooting range in Kamchatka. Repeatedly, Russia has stressed that it is developing hypersonic weapons to ensure that the Russian strategic forces can penetrate future US air and missile defenses. How does Avangard work? As it approaches its target, the Avangard glide vehicle detaches from the rocket and is able to maneuver sharply outside the trajectory of the rocket at hypersonic speeds of up to 27 times the speed of sound, which is equivalent to a mind-boggling 34,000 kilometers per hour. The reason it is so difficult to intercept is because it constantly alters the missile's trajectory. Accelerating at the supersonic speed of 27 Machs, the Avangard weighs approximately 2,000 kilos and has a range of over 6,000 kilometers and is capable of carrying both nuclear and conventional payload. Reportedly, Avangard HGV's nuclear warhead is more than 2 megatons in TNT equivalent. No wonder then that it has been classified as one of the invincible weapons Russia has in its possession. The unveiling of the dreaded weapon at a time when Ukrainians are bracing for a second winter of Russian airstrikes doesn't bode well for Kiev.
The military junta in Myanmar is facing its sternest challenge to its authority since having grabbed power in a coup in 2021. An alliance of 3 Myanmar ethnic minority groups called the Brotherhood Alliance has waged a coordinated offensive since the 27th of October, thereby rattling the military junta. The offensive that's been named by the rebels is Operation 1027, signifying the date on which it began, has made inroads into the junta-controlled areas in the northern Shan state, the Kaya state in the east, and the Rakhine state in the west. The rebels claim to have overrun nearly about 100 military outposts, besides capturing several border towns, which has basically cut off the cross-border trade between Myanmar and China. At least about 75 civilians, including children, have been killed, and close to 100 others have been wounded in these clashes. Our next report gets you more details.
The Southeast Asian nation of Myanmar was plunged into crisis when Senior General Min Aung Hlaing grabbed power from Myanmar's democratically elected government in a military coup in February 2021. Mass protests against this illegal power grab erupted. Military generals responded to these nationwide protests with brute force, further antagonizing their civilian opponents. Since then, it has been proven to be an uphill task for the military junta to contain the dogged resistance to its rule. Another front of the anti-military resistance has been Myanmar's borderlands, home to more than a dozen ethnic rebel groups. For decades, these rebels have waged a war against the military over autonomy and control of lucrative resources. The 2021 coup united pro-democracy activists in towns and cities with the ethnic minority forces fighting in the hinterlands for self-determination. On the 27th of October, a coalition of 3 ethnic rebel groups known as the Brotherhood Alliance, the Tang National Liberation Army, the Arakan Army, and the Myanmar National Democratic Alliance Army, or MNDAA, launched coordinated attacks on the military across a swath of Myanmar's northern Shan state. The Brotherhood Alliance is believed to have a strength of 15,000 fighters. Reportedly, they have overrun more than 100 military posts, captured border crossings, and the vital roads carrying most of the overland trade with China. Even drones have been used by the insurgents to drop bombs on the military posts. The capture and control of major cities like Chinchi Ho and Kurlong by rebel forces has dealt a devastating blow to the Myanmar army. Acknowledging the gravity of the situation, former General Mint Swe, who was appointed president after the 2021 coup, held an emergency meeting of the ruling military council. Terming the rebels as terrorists, the former general issued a warning that the country is in danger of breaking apart if the military junta is not able to control the fighting soon. A $1 billion rail route, part of Beijing's Global Belt and Road Infrastructure project, is planned in the northern Shan state, but the escalating conflict has put a question mark on the viability of the project.
What that means, and I think at least currently means the bilateral trade between, at least bilateral border trade between China and Myanmar has probably come to a stop, right? And basically waiting for the situation to improve, and then we'll see how things will go. If Myanmar does not have domestic instability, then what's the point of talking about Belt and Road? Right? I mean, you cannot have sort of stable economic relations or investment in infrastructure or in many sort of, sectors of the economy if you don't have domestic stability. Right?
United Nations estimates that more than 200,000 people have been displaced by the fighting between the junta and the Brotherhood Alliance. Thousands, in a bid to escape the fighting, have crossed the Myanmar border into Chinese and Indian territories seeking refuge. About 5,000 people have fled from the conflict zone and crossed into India's Mizoram state.
Cannot go back also.
In addition to this, at least 42 Myanmar soldiers have surrendered to the police in Mizoram. Signaling the rapidly deteriorating situation, Myanmar government staff has been asked to get ready for emergencies. And local media have reported that a call has been issued for those with military experience to prepare to serve. Analysts are of the opinion that the biggest military challenge to the army is tantamount to an existential crisis.
Clearly, things are no longer sustainable for the Myanmar army. At some point, it's either going to have to give up very significant parts of territory, or it might even be pushed to potentially make even bigger concessions. The Myanmar military, I think, is facing an existential crisis at this point.
The military ruler, General Ming Aung Hlaing, attacked the ethnic armies, labeling them as drug gangs, claiming that the offensive has been paid for by the production and the trafficking of narcotics. The Myanmar army so far has failed to mount a serious counter-offensive on the ground, primarily relying on air and artillery strikes. Consequently, the military junta's response to the groundswell of opposition, backed by armed resistance, has failed to quell the resistance so far. Will these renewed coordinated attacks by the rebels prove to be a turning point in the history of Myanmar?
The strategic town of Kidal in northern Mali occupies a special place in Sahelian geography and consciousness. A former French military post since the beginning of the 20th century, the town was a stronghold of Tuareg-dominated separatist groups since 2014. In a major victory, the Malian Junta has managed to recapture Kidal on the 14th of November. The capture of Kidal is a significant and a symbolic success for the Malian Junta leaders who had seized power in 2020. But the question is this: will the capture of Kidal now prove to be a pivotal moment in the fight against the armed groups in the Sahel region?
Kidal is a town and commune in the desert region of northern Mali. Historically a hotbed of insurrection, it's a key site on the road to Algeria with some 25,000 people living here. A stronghold of Tuareg-dominated separatist groups, the Malian army had suffered humiliating defeats in Kidal between 2012 and 2014. Consequently, the army and the state had been virtually absent for years from the town. The insubordination of the town and of the Kidal region has been a long-standing source of irritation for the government in the capital, Bamako. Violence escalated in the north of Mali since August, triggering a race between armed actors, namely the military, rebels and jihadists, vying for country of territory and the camps being evacuated by UN peacekeepers. The military drew closer to Kidal over the past weekend, and on the 14th of November, in a statement read on national television, the Malian Junta claimed the capture of Kidal.
Today, November 14th, thanks to Allah, because of the courage and determination of our armed forces, a raid was carried out a few days ago in the direction of Kidal, and heavy losses inflicted on the armed terrorist groups. Today, our armed and security forces have taken Kidal.
The Permanent Strategic Framework, or CSP, an alliance of predominantly Tuareg armed groups, acknowledged that it had withdrawn from Kidal, albeit for strategic reasons. Operational in Mali since 2013, the UN mission MINUSMA is made up of military personnel from 60 countries, with Germany, Bangladesh, Chad, Egypt and Senegal being among the main contributors. The UN mission was deployed a year after Islamist groups and their Tuareg rebel allies had seized the north of the country. Together with the French troops, MINUSMA managed to regain control of the main cities, pushing the jihadists to desert outposts. After the ruling Mali junta demanded the mission's ouster from Mali, nearly 6,000 civilian and uniformed personnel have been withdrawn. United Nations Security Council has set 31st December as the deadline for the withdrawal. The rebels do not want the UN peacekeepers to hand their camps back to the Malian army, saying it contravenes previously agreed ceasefire and peace deals struck with the government. When MINUSMA left its camp in Kidal on the 31st of October, the rebels seized control of it, much to the dismay of Mali's junta. After Mali's army recaptured the strategic northern town of Kidal, the residents in the capital Bamako celebrated the event.
I wouldn't call it a victory. Victory was always in my camp. There were traitors in front of me. I never doubted my army. I knew that this would happen one day, and that day is November 14th, 2023. It will go down in Mali's history. Those who have done, we do nothing but encourage them, and those who have fallen on the battlefield, military or civilian, we pay tribute to them. May Allah bless Mali, and may Mali always be one and indivisible.
Kidal was shaping up to be the ultimate hold in the ongoing security reconfiguration in northern Mali. Will the capture of Kidal prove to be a trigger that will flush out the rebels and the jihadists from the whole of Mali? Only time will tell.
And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of World at War. And if you want to reach out to me with any comments, feedback or suggestions, please feel free to do so on the ID that you're seeing on your screens. I'm your host, Mohammed Saleh, and I'll see you again next week.